This doesn't go down without someone answering for it. Those were the words of ex-mayor, interim mayor of Port Richey, Terrence Rowe, on the phone with his buddy, his pal, the man who calls him the governor, Dale Massad, when Dale Massad was sitting at the county jail facing some charges. Those two spoke about an officer, Donald, or you're going to hear Kenneth Howard, of the Port Richey Police Department, who you will learn was involved in some of the investigation dealing with Dale Massad. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And by way of reintroduction, my name is Rita Peters, and along with Diana Bach, we have the honor to represent the people of the state of Florida. As jurors, you have two very special duties. First, you and only you get to determine what happened at a certain place, certain time, the true facts, if you will. And then once you've reached that conclusion, then you and only you apply the law, and only the law, as the judge gives you, to those facts to render a verdict. And we're confident that when you complete those two duties, the only verdict that can be achieved is guilty as charged. So what did happen that resulted in this trial? Why are we here? Well, you have the opportunity to meet witnesses who either saw something, did something, heard something, reacted to something, and you will see items of evidence that fill in the pieces between the witnesses that will link the bridge to guilt. Because as he sits there today, Mr. Massad is cloaked in the presumption of innocence. But with each witness, every piece of testimony, every piece of evidence, that cloak is going to be removed and he will be found guilty. What you will learn, and you will have the opportunity to meet, is Special Agent Corey Davidson from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And he will introduce himself, tell you about his experience, his history, the other agencies he may have worked for, and he will tell you that in August of 2018, he was asked to begin an investigation against then-mayor of Port Richey, Dale Massad. And that he undertook this investigation, and because of the type of investigation and his location and where it was located, he asked for assistance, and sometimes he needed the assistance of the City of Port Richey's Police Department. So along with the chief, Gerard DeCanio, or Jerry DeCanio, he then got some of that assistance. And one of those officers that helped him was Officer Kenny, or Donald Howard. He helped him in either interviewing witnesses, conducting surveillance, just the typical steps you take in an investigation. Because Corey couldn't do it all himself. He wasn't a one-man show. And then he will tell you that at the conclusion, or at least at some point in his investigation, he determined that it was time to arrest Dale Massad for some criminal activity. And you're going to hear a jail call from Dale Massad where he tells you, practicing medicine without a license. So the Florida Department of Law Enforcement took it upon their duties to try to get this arrest effectuated. And they also wanted to conduct a search warrant on his house. And you will hear what a search warrant is. It's basically permission granted by a judge to go into some place and search. And so with the search warrant in hand, and with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, they went to the house of Dale Massad, and some other situations arose that provided Mr. Massad a more serious future. And he was taken to the jail. And you will learn that at the jail, all the calls are recorded. That's just the standard. And any good investigator is going to ask for all those communications. They want to hear what's being said. And you're going to hear how on March the 3rd of 2019, that Corey Davidson was alerted to a phone call that was made by Dale Massad, who at this point had been told by the governor of the state of Florida, you are no longer the mayor of the city of Port Richey. You have no powers to do anything for the city of Port Richey. Basically, stay out of their business. And he is speaking with then interim mayor and buddy, the governor, Terrence Rowe. And the governor is pretty upset with him. Terrence Rowe is pretty upset with the investigation, not with Massad. I'm mad. This doesn't go down without someone answering for it. And you will hear on that phone call an agreement. Now, at the conclusion of this trial, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the jury instructions. This is not the point to do that. So suffice it to say, at the end and the conclusion of all the evidence, I will give you the perspective of what that agreement was. But on this phone call, Terrence Rowe and Dale Massad discuss Howard. In fact, Massad even says, Howard has his hand in all of this. He expresses his dislike, disdain, I would venture to say even hatred, towards the Port Richey Police Department, because as you will hear on that jail telephone call, They stand in the way to his ultimate goal, dredging the canals. That's what he wanted, and he had to remove them any way he could. So this phone call happens, and Terrence Rowe then takes the ball and starts running because they've agreed. They're getting to the bottom of this. Someone has to answer for this. This doesn't go down without someone answering for this. And Terrence Rowe begins his investigation of Officer Howard. He begins by ordering a personnel file of Officer Howard. But when that didn't provide what he needed, the smoking gun, if you will, he then asked for his disciplinary record. And you'll hear a little bit about why there is an arbitration hearing. You're going to hear that occurred, but that Officer Howard, not only was he reinstated to full duty, he was given back pay and all the apparent bumps that go with that because the city was in the wrong. You're also going to hear how both Massad and Rowe were fully aware of this when it happened almost a year before this phone call, more than a year before this phone call, even signed off on it. And in that time frame, they had no problem with Officer Howard. And it wasn't until cuffs went on that man, taking away his control and his power in the city, that he wanted to have someone answer for it. You're going to have the opportunity also to meet Vincent Lupo, who is the city manager for the city of Port Richey. He currently is a city manager. But what's interesting about Mr. Lupo is he's also a very dear friend of then Mayor Massad. And he's going to tell you basically a little bit about the city, how it works, what the city council does as far as when someone wants to request a record. Because what you will hear from Vincent Lupo is there's actually a procedure in place that he put there so that he could help city council members. He could help the city to circumvent basically a public records request, the timing of all of that. And the procedure is, if you're doing something for the city and you need help, I'm your man. That's in essence what Mr. Lupo is going to tell you. And it's not uncommon for city council members, and Mr. Rowe, he will tell you, has done this before, to go up to him and say, hey, Vince, I'm looking into this. Can you please get me this report? But what struck his attention is that that's not what Terry Rowe did. What Terry Rowe did was he didn't want to bring this to the attention of the city manager because they were going to get someone to answer for this. And so he went through the email, city email. And he's like, Sal Akari, who is the city clerk, please give me the personnel file. Another email 3 days later. What's taking so long? Shake a leg. And then when the meat wasn't in that personnel file, when the dirt wasn't in there, when stuff that they wanted to embarrass Howard wasn't in there, I want his arbitration records. And when he still didn't get those, I want the hearings, I want the transcripts, I want it all. Taking it even further, showing someone had to answer for this. You will also meet Officer Kenny Howard. And you will learn that this is a small police department. We're not talking New York City. We're not talking Secret Service. We're not talking any of this. We're talking Port Richey Police Department, a city approximately 3 square miles, approximately 16 police officers. And you will hear how, before going there, he was a corrections officer. He was also in the Army. He has a plethora of experience before walking into the Port Richey Police Department. And he will tell you how his chief, his main supervisor, asked him in August, hey, can you help out the Florida Department of Law Enforcement on this investigation? He said, sure. And the reason he was picked is because he knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody in Port Richey. Officer Howard had contacts with everybody in there, especially those acquaintances of Dale Massad. And so what he did is he helped. Surveillance, interviews, covert operations, whatever he was asked to do, he did. And at the end, he actually even took part in the arrest by being security, basically putting his car there and making sure no one got in and out of the house that wasn't authorized to. And Officer Howard will tell you that after the arrest, he was also asked to continue helping. And the reason behind it is because Corey Davidson didn't have access to the jail calls at the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. So he went to Chief DeCanio and said, hey, can I get Kenny to help me with this too? Absolutely. And Officer Kenny Howard began to listen to all the communications. And it wasn't until March 3rd that he stumbled upon his name and his alert went up. And his name didn't come up, obviously, in a positive context, but it came up, someone's got to answer for this. Whatever you could do were those words from Massad, whatever you could do. And what he's going to tell you is that After this phone call, and based on some of the statements in this phone call, he was concerned. He's like, they're going to start causing trouble for me. And that was only further cemented when he learned that his personnel file had been ordered. And it was made even more clear to him that they were coming after him when the city manager, the man who's one of his best buds, close to Mayor Massad, even warned Kenny Howard, hey, Roe's coming after you. And we are confident that when you hear the evidence, as it will be presented, and you will apply the law as the judge will read to you, that the verdict that you will return is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defense wish to make an opening statement at this time?
We do.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Will please the court, members of the jury. I sat quietly. I sat with a degree of, let's call it agreement, that we do not interrupt each other during the course of argument, not because I agree with what she had to say, but because those are the rules of court. There's going to be no evidence introduced during the course of this trial, no evidence whatsoever that there was a conspiracy to violate any law whatsoever. This phone call, which is subject of this trial, which is the very subject of it, you will have an opportunity to listen to. You will find it to be 14 and a half minutes long. 14 and a half minutes. For 13 and a half minutes, it had nothing to do with the discussions of what the prosecutor has indicated. For 13 and a half minutes, it was a phone call about the city. It was a phone call about someone who was once mayor talking to the current mayor about business, about the city, about the citizens of the city, and what can those two men do to make sure that the people of Port Richey are given the best possible representation. You will find that the majority of that call was about dredging. And that was a pet project of Dale Massad. He felt that the citizens of this very small town, which is a waterfront community, could receive approximately $1.3 million if one thing happened. And that one thing was that if the Port Richey Police Department was subsumed by the Sheriff's Department, and sometimes these small towns, that's what they're doing. They're doing to save money. The Sheriff's Office comes in. They have to protect them anyway. You're going to hear that. It's something that taxpayers pay for anyway. And you're going to hear comments about how it would cost about $750,000 for the sheriff to be paid so that they could take over the duties of the Port Richey Police Department. I'll tell you the relevance in a minute. And you're going to hear the statement that if that is done, it will save the taxpayers $1.3 million. Some people didn't like that. Some people that worked in law enforcement, that worked for the Port Richey Police Department, of which Officer Howard is a member, didn't like that. He's going to be without a job. Comes in with some baggage that's going to come out on cross-examination. May not be picked up by the sheriff. So for those 13 and a half minutes, they talked not about a conspiracy, not about Howard. He came up. And this tape is the trial. And this is what you're going to hear. And I'll say Roe and I'll say Massad. And this is just the 1 minute that you're going to hear having anything to do with this trial. Roe, you have witnessed a political assassination, a bloodless coup. Massad, they wanted me out. And be careful, Terry. You didn't do anything anyway. Roe, I am doing some research to determine who, what, and when. Massad, keep on. I heard you are taking control of things. And be careful. They will throw you under the, and there's the expletive I talked about, MF, bus. Massad, I do not believe in Jerry DeCanio. He's the sheriff, the police chief of Port Richey. I believe Howard was hired illegally fired legally and rehired illegally. They're going to make a big thing of this. But that's what Mayor Massad thought. You see, Howard made an application to become a police officer. And what you're going to hear is the obligations of becoming a police officer. There has to be certain things that have to be present. One of which is you've never been arrested for a crime as an adult. And you're going to find out that that was the case, and a conviction on Howard. He was hired anyway. So that was Dale Massad's thought, is he was hired illegally. And then he said he was fired legally. Okay? In other words, when Lupo fired him, and it was Lupo that fired him, only the city manager. By the way, they talk about harassment. This man had no ability to fire Howard. He couldn't fire him. It's not in the charter. You're going to learn that during the course of the trial. Only Lupo could have done that. And Lupo did that. So it went to an arbitration hearing. I want my job back. I want my job back. And it went to a hearing, and what you're going to find out, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, is that Lupo did not go through the proper procedures. He relied on hearsay, and he got blasted by the arbitrator. And they said, give him his job back, and they gave him his job back, and they gave him his money back. And I digressed. I believe Howard was hired illegally, fired legally, and rehired legally. Massad. I don't know why, but he's in on everything. Rowe. I'm on it. Massad. So anything you can do is good. Rowe. This don't go down without somebody. Been joking about the old movie Godfather. Somebody's got to answer. I want to know this doesn't go down without somebody answering for it. They felt it was an illegal investigation against this man, an illegal arrest against this man, and they wanted to investigate somebody. They wanted to look into him. They wanted to find out what's going on. What happened in administrative hearing? And you know the only thing that happened in this case after this phone call, and the last thing said, by the way, was Rowe. Like I said, I'm on top of it. I'm not very happy. That's it. That's the conspiracy to obstruct justice. That's it. Because what happened was Rowe then asked for the personnel file. And maybe some of you know this, maybe some of you don't, but when you're in public office, your personnel file is available to everybody, even every citizen. If you wanted to come on in and take a look at somebody's police department personnel file, you just have to make an appointment. And what we're going to give to you is a stipulation by the government that they signed saying this is a public record. It's public record. And yet they're saying it's harassment to ask for a public record. Same thing about the arbitration hearing. Let's read some of this stuff. Let me see the order. Let me see the testimony. What were people saying about Howard that caused Lupo to fire him? Can I look at it? Can I read it? Rowe asked to see it. He made application to see it. The government is I'm going to show you a document where the government said he had every right to do that. Anybody in this city had a right to do it. So their complaint about, you listen to this tape, you're going to see the majority of it has nothing to do with anything other than a couple of words that they pulled out about this doesn't go down without somebody. That's his right to say that. That's the frustration of it. But you're going to find out during the course of this trial and by the end of the trial that there was not one thing that this man did to obstruct justice. And not one thing that Terry Rowe did to obstruct justice. And they certainly didn't agree with each other to do anything unlawfully. And that's what the law is going to require you to determine. The intent of Dale Glenn Massad was that the offense of obstruction of justice would be committed. His intent by this tape was that it be committed and that he agreed with Terry Rowe to violate that law. That's conspiracy. And conspiracy to do what? To obstruct justice. Well, let me tell you what we all have a feeling about what we know the definition of that is. And it's that the two of them falsely under color of law. Big words. Let me bring them on down. falsely under color of law. They did these things. They asked for these records. They asked for the transcripts. Color of law means an act done under the appearance of legal authorization. You're doing something under the appearance, like somebody that acted like a police officer that he wasn't. That's color of law. And they said falsely. He had no legal justification. I suggest to you that not only did he have the legal right to do everything they did in this case, but what you're going to find out is my government signed a document that you're going to look at that said that they did. So that leaves us with, why are we here? There's got to be something more to it. I mean, it's the old head scratching. We're going to be done here this afternoon. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are here on this trial and this trial only. You heard other things that she had talked about, things that happened at this house. You are jurors on this case. And what you're going to determine at the end of this case is whether or not there was a conspiracy to violate the law, a conspiracy to obstruct justice. And you're going to say no. But I want to go one thing further when I get up here at the end of the trial. I want to tell you why you're here. It has nothing to do with conspiracy. It has nothing to do with violating the law in this case. It has everything to do with politics, and I'm going to prove it. Everything to do with politics. If they get this man out of office, police department stays, money stays, the projects he wants gets failed, and we bring in somebody else. It's the oldest reason in the world. Sit back, listen to the evidence in this case. They're going to be playing the tape. You're going to hear about a letter. You're going to hear Mr. Massad start out by saying, "Did you get my letter, Terry?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Interesting. I wonder why you didn't get my letter. Who grabbed my letter? Why didn't you get my letter?" Well, you're going to see the letter. I'm going to make sure that it gets in front of you. It talks all about government business. Not one, in that 2-page handwritten letter, not one word has anything to do with these charges. Nothing. All government business. Terry, look into this. You're going to hear about people going to Washington to try to get these dredging permits. So anyway, you're going to listen to the evidence, you're going to listen to the tape, you're going to read the letter, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk once again at the end of the trial. I am as confident as Ms. Peters, who said you were going to convict him of this charge, that you will not. That you will find that there's more than a reasonable doubt, and there's been no evidence to suggest the violation of any laws whatsoever. Thank you.